The distinction between assignment and novation is a fundamental concept on the national portion of the real estate exam because both involve a change in contract parties but lead to very different legal outcomes. In an assignment, one party known as the assignor transfers their rights and duties to a third party called the assignee. This is often compared to a relay race where the baton is passed. The most critical point to remember is that in an assignment, the original party is not off the hook. If the new buyer fails to perform, the seller can still pursue the original buyer for damages because the original buyer retains secondary liability. Generally, most real estate contracts are assignable unless the contract specifically prohibits it, which means the assigner usually does not need the permission of the other original party to transfer their interest. Contrast this with novation, which is the act of replacing an existing contract with a completely new one, or substituting a new party for an original one. The defining characteristic of a novation is the complete release of the original party's liability. When a novation occurs, the old contract is legally extinguished and a brand new agreement takes its place. Because this changes the legal obligations so significantly, a novation always requires the consent of all parties involved. You cannot have a novation without the seller and both the original and new buyers all agreeing to the swap. On the exam, you need to watch for specific trigger words like release. If the question mentions that a party is released from all further obligations, you are looking at a novation. If the question describes a buyer finding a replacement but remaining responsible if things go wrong, that is an assignment. A classic exam scenario involves the assumption of a mortgage. If a buyer assumes a seller's loan and the lender signs a document releasing the seller from any future liability, a novation has occurred. However, if the lender does not release the seller, it is simply an assumption or an assignment of debt where the seller stays secondary liable. A common trap is thinking that every time a name changes on a contract, it is a novation. Most standard purchase agreements allow for assignment by default, but a novation requires a separate agreement to void the old contract. To help you remember this for test day, use the phrase that assignment keeps the original party aligned with the debt, while novation creates a brand new station. Assignment means you are still assigned to the responsibility, but novation means you have a new deal entirely. Another thing to watch out for is the type of contract being discussed. Contracts for personal services, like a listing agreement between a seller and a specific broker, are generally not assignable because they rely on the specific skills or reputation of a person. However, a standard sales contract for real property is a right that can typically be assigned. When you are sitting for the exam, always ask yourself if the original person is still on the hook. If they are, then choose assignment. If they are free and clear because everyone agreed to a new start, then choose novation. Understanding this distinction will help you navigate complex contract law questions and avoid the trick wording that suggests a release where none exists. This will ensure you correctly identify the primary and secondary responsibilities of buyers and sellers in any transaction scenario. If you remember that novation equals a brand new contract and assignment is just a transfer of the old one, you will be well prepared for these questions on the national exam.